Jack Taylor wasn't the kind of man who sat around doing nothing. Even in his late 60s, he kept himself busy with small projects, fixing things around the house, tending to his garden, or taking long walks through the neighborhood. His hair had turned silver over the years, but his posture was still straight, and his hands were strong and steady. People often said there was something about him that commanded respect, though they couldn't quite put their finger on it. Maybe it was the way he carried himself, calm and confident like someone who'd seen more than his fair share of life's ups and downs. When Lily called him that morning, Jack immediately sensed something was wrong. Her voice wavered as she spoke, and when she finally told him what happened at school, his jaw tightened. He didn't say much at first, just listened quietly while she explained how her sweatpants had ripped during gym class and how Mr. Bennett had sent her home without pants. By the time she finished, her voice was shaking again, and Jack could hear the tears she was trying so hard to hold back. "All right, sweetheart," he said gently. "Don't cry. I'll come over right now." True to his word, Jack arrived within 10 minutes. He pulled up in his old pickup truck, its paint faded from years of use, and stepped out wearing a flannel shirt tucked into jeans. In one hand, he carried a toolbox. In the other, a reusable grocery bag. Lily opened the door before he could knock, her face pale and streaked with dried tears. She looked smaller somehow, standing there bare-legged under her oversized gym shirt. "Hey, kiddo," Jack said, giving her a warm smile. "Let's get you fixed up." He followed her inside and set the toolbox and grocery bag on the kitchen table. Inside the bag were a pair of scissors, some thread, and a needle, things he always kept handy for quick repairs. But instead of starting on the pants right away, he pulled out a chair and motioned for Lily to sit down. "Now," he began, leaning forward slightly, "tell me everything, from the beginning." So Lily did. She told him about gym class, the timed laps, and the moment she realized her sweatpants were tearing. She described how embarrassed she felt when people started laughing, and how unfair it seemed when Mr. Bennett refused to let her explain. The more she talked, the angrier Jack became. But not at Lily. His anger was directed elsewhere, toward the teacher who had humiliated his granddaughter. When she finished, Jack nodded slowly. "I see," he said, his voice calm but firm. "And this Mr. Bennett, does he treat all the kids like this?" Lily shrugged. "I don't know. Some of them are scared of him, though. He's really strict." Jack frowned. Strictness wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It taught discipline and accountability. But there was a line between being tough and being cruel. Sending a young girl home without pants crossed that line. "Well," he said after a pause, "we'll figure this out together. First, let's fix those pants so you can wear them again if you need to." He opened the toolbox and took out a spool of sturdy black thread. Then he carefully examined the tear in Lily's sweatpants. It wasn't as bad as she'd feared, just a single seam that had come undone. With practiced hands, Jack threaded the needle and began stitching. Each movement was precise, almost rhythmic, and soon the rip was nearly invisible. "There," he said, holding up the repaired pants. "Good. As new?" Lily smiled weakly, grateful for his help. But Jack wasn't done yet. He leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "You know," he said, "this reminds me of something that happened a long time ago. Back when I was your age, I ran into a guy who thought he could push people around. Real bully name was Richard Bennett." Lily blinked. "Richard Bennett? Like my teacher?" Jack chuckled softly. "Could be. Same last name anyway. Small world, huh?" She stared at him wide-eyed. "What happened?" "Oh, nothing too exciting," Jack replied casually, though his eyes sparkled with mischief. "Just taught him a little lesson about respect." Turns out he wasn't so tough once he realized he couldn't intimidate everyone. Lily didn't press for details. She'd heard stories about her grandfather before, how he used to compete in martial arts tournaments, how he'd served in the military, how people sometimes joked that he was related to Chuck Norris. She never knew which parts were true and which were exaggerations, but one thing was certain. Jack Taylor was not someone you wanted to cross. "What should I do?" she asked hesitantly. About Mr. Bennett, I mean. Jack considered this for a moment. You don't have to do anything right now. Let me talk to him tomorrow. We'll sort this out. But, Lily hesitated. What if he gets mad at you too? Jack laughed, a deep, hearty sound that filled the room. Don't worry about me, kiddo. I've dealt with worse. The next morning, Jack drove Lily to school in his pickup truck. She sat nervously in the passenger seat, clutching her backpack tightly. As they approached Maplewood Middle School, she noticed heads turning, the students milling about outside, paused to stare at the unfamiliar vehicle and its rugged driver. Whispers spread quickly among the crowd. Who's that? Is that Lily's grandpa? He looks like... No way. By the time they reached the main entrance, Lily felt a mix of embarrassment and curiosity. Everyone seemed to recognize Jack, though she couldn't understand why. Sure, he looked tough, but he wasn't exactly famous. Or was he? Inside the building, the hallways buzzed with activity. Students hurried to their lockers, comparing notes and gossiping about the mysterious older man accompanying Lily. Word traveled fast, and by the time they reached Mr. Bennett's classroom, a small group had gathered outside the door, eager to catch a glimpse of what might happen next. Jack knocked lightly on the open door frame and stepped inside. Mr. Bennett was sitting at his desk grading papers when he looked up and saw them. For a brief moment his face paled, though he quickly masked it with a look of irritation. "Can I help you?" he asked sharply, his tone clipped. Jack smiled politely. "Morning. I'm Jack Taylor, Lily's grandfather. We need to have a word." "Mr." Bennett stood up, his posture stiff. "About what?" "About yesterday," Jack said calmly. "When you sent my granddaughter home without pants." The teacher's jaw tightened. She broke the rules. Students are expected to maintain their uniforms properly. If they can't handle that responsibility, there are consequences. "I agree," Jack replied, nodding. "Responsibility is important, but so is fairness." "Did you give her a chance to explain? Or did you jump straight to punishment?" Mr. Bennett hesitated, clearly caught off guard. "That's beside the point. Rules exist for a reason. And respect exists for a reason too," Jack countered. "You humiliated her in front of her peers. That's not discipline. That's cruelty." For a moment neither man spoke. The tension in the room was palpable, heavy enough to make the students lingering outside hold their breath. Then Mr. Bennett cleared his throat and gestured toward a chair. "Fine," he said, grudging other. Lily Parker was not the kind of girl who stood out in a crowd. She was 14 years old with long brown hair that she usually tied back into a simple ponytail. Her clothes were always clean but plain, jeans, sneakers, and t-shirts most days. At Maplewood Middle School, where everyone seemed to have their own thing, Lily didn't really have one. She wasn't part of the cheerleading squad or the robotics club. She wasn't known for being funny or super smart. But what she lacked, in flashiness, she made up for in kindness. Most people liked her because she smiled easily and never said unkind things about anyone. That morning started like any other. The sun peeked through the curtains of her bedroom window as her alarm clock buzzed loudly on the nightstand. Lily groaned and rolled over, slapping the snooze button before finally sitting up. She stretched her arms above her head and yawned. It was Monday, which meant gym class later that day. Gym class wasn't her favorite subject, but it wasn't the worst either. She could run okay, throw a ball decently, and climb the rope if she had to. Still, there was something about changing into those scratchy uniforms and running laps around the track that made her feel awkward every time. After brushing her teeth and pulling on her usual outfit, a pair of blue jeans and a striped shirt, Lily went downstairs to find her mom already busy in the kitchen. Sarah Parker worked 2 jobs to keep the family afloat, so mornings were often rushed. Today was no exception. As soon as Lily walked into the kitchen, her mom handed her a piece of toast smeared with peanut butter. "Eat fast," Sarah said, glancing at the clock on the wall. "You don't want to miss the bus again." Lily nodded and took a bite of the toast. She didn't argue. Missing the bus meant walking all the way to school, and while it wasn't far, it was still embarrassing when you showed up sweaty and late. Besides, gym class was first period today, and showing up late would only make Mr. Bennett even grumpier than usual. Mr. Bennett was the physical education teacher at Maplewood Middle School, and he was strict. Some kids thought he was mean, but Lily figured he just cared too much about rules. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with short dark hair and a voice that carried across the gymnasium without needing a microphone. When he told students to do something, they did it, or else they faced the consequences. Usually that meant extra laps or push-ups. Sometimes, though, it meant getting sent home early. And nobody wanted to get sent home early, especially not without pants. The bus ride to school passed quickly, filled with chatter from other students. Lily sat near the back, listening half-heartedly as her best friend Emma talked excitedly about some new video game she'd downloaded over the weekend. Emma was everything Lily wasn't: outgoing, confident, and full of energy. They'd been friends since 3rd grade, and despite their differences, they got along perfectly. When the bus pulled up to the front of the school, Lily followed the crowd off, clutching her backpack tightly. Inside, the hallways were buzzing with activity. Students compared homework answers, complained about tests, and laughed over inside jokes. Lily spotted Emma heading toward her locker and waved goodbye before making her way to her own. First period came sooner than expected. By the time the bell rang, Lily was already dreading the moment she'd have to change into her gym uniform. Gym uniforms at Maplewood weren't exactly stylish. They consisted of baggy gray shorts and bright orange t-shirts that clashed horribly with almost anything. Worse, the fabric felt rough against her skin, and the shorts always rode up during sprints. Still, she managed to get dressed without too much trouble and joined the rest of her classmates in the gym. Mr. Bennett stood at the center of the basketball court, clipboard in hand, looking as serious as ever. His whistle hung around his neck, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "All right, listen up," he barked, and immediately the noise level dropped. "Today we're doing timed laps, 5 minutes per lap. If you can't keep up, you'll stay after class and practice until you can. Understood?" A chorus of, "Yes, Mr. Bennett," echoed through the room, and Lily nodded along with everyone else. She wasn't particularly fast, but she could handle 5-minute laps, or so she thought. As the group lined up at the starting line, Lily adjusted her sweatpants nervously. They were a little old and frayed at the bottom, but they'd held up fine during previous runs. She wasn't worried about them falling apart. Yet the whistle blew, and the students took off. Lily kept a steady pace, staying near the middle of the pack. The first lap went smoothly, and by the second she was feeling pretty good. But halfway through the 3rd lap, disaster struck. With each step, she heard a faint tearing sound. At first, she ignored it, thinking maybe someone else's shoe was squeaking against the floor. But then she felt it, the unmistakable sensation of fabric giving way. Her heart sank. Sure enough, when she glanced down, she saw that the seam of her sweatpants had split wide open. Not just a little tear either. It was a gaping hole right along the side, exposing her leg almost completely. Mortified, Lily slowed to a stop and stepped off the track, hoping no one had noticed. Unfortunately, luck wasn't on her side. One of the boys behind her pointed and laughed, drawing attention to her predicament. Within seconds, several heads turned in her direction. Faces lit up with smirks and giggles. Lily's cheeks burned red as she clutched the torn fabric, trying desperately to hold it together. "Parker!" Mr. Bennett's sharp voice cut through the laughter. "What's going on here? Why aren't you running?" She hesitated, unsure how to explain. Finally, she mumbled, "My pants ripped." Instead of offering sympathy, Mr. Bennett frowned deeply. "Ripped? How does that happen? Did you check your uniform before putting it on this morning?" "Yes," Lily stammered. "I mean, I didn't think—" "That's the problem," Mr. Bennett interrupted. "You didn't think. If you'd taken better care of your uniform, this wouldn't have happened. Rules are rules, Parker. You know what happens when students come unprepared." Lily's stomach twisted. She knew exactly what he meant. Unprepared. Students got sent home early, without pants, but— She began, her voice trembling. "No excuses," Mr. Bennett snapped. "Go to the office, have them call your parents. Maybe next time you'll remember to take responsibility for your belongings." Tears pricked at the corners of Lily's eyes as she shuffled toward the door. Every step felt heavier than the last. She couldn't believe this was happening. Walking home bare-legged under her oversized gym shirt was bad enough, but knowing that everyone in the gym was probably laughing at her made it 10 times worse. Outside, the air was cool against her exposed skin. She crossed her arms tightly over her chest, holding the gym shirt down as far as it would go. Cars drove past, and she prayed none of them belonged to neighbors or friends' parents. The walk home felt endless, each block stretching longer than the last. By the time she reached her house, her face was flushed with embarrassment, and her throat felt tight from holding back tears. Inside, the house was quiet. Her mom must still be at work. Lily closed the door softly behind her and leaned against it, letting out a shaky breath. What was she supposed to do now? Call her mom? Try to sew the pants herself? Neither option seemed appealing. Then she remembered her grandfather. Jack Taylor lived just a few streets away, and though he wasn't around much these days, he was always happy to see her. Maybe he could help, or at least offer some advice. With nothing left to lose, Lily picked up the phone and dialed his number. After 2 rings, he answered, his deep voice instantly calming her nerves. "Hey, kiddo," he said warmly. "What's up?" Lily swallowed hard, fighting back fresh tears. "Grandpa, I need your help." Mr. Bennett's invitation to sit down didn't soften the tension in the room. It only made it worse. Jack Taylor glanced at the chair briefly, then shook his head. He remained standing, his arms crossed loosely over his chest, exuding a calm confidence that seemed to fill the space around him. Mr. Bennett, on the other hand, looked uneasy. His earlier stern demeanor had cracked slightly, replaced by something closer to discomfort. "All right," Mr. Bennett said, clearing his throat, again as he returned to his own seat behind the desk. "Let's talk. What exactly do you want from me?" Jack tilted his head slightly, studying the man before him. There was no malice in his gaze, just a quiet intensity that made Mr. Bennett shift uncomfortably in his chair. "I'm not here to demand anything," Jack replied evenly. "I just want to understand why you thought sending Lily home without pants was the right decision." "It wasn't personal," Mr. Bennett insisted, his voice rising slightly. "Rules are rules. If she can't take care of her uniform, she has to face the consequences." "And what lesson does that teach her?" Jack asked, his tone still calm but firm. "That making mistakes means being humiliated? That's not discipline, that's punishment for the sake of punishment. Discipline is about teaching, not shaming." Mr. Bennett opened his mouth to argue but stopped himself. For the first time since the conversation began, he actually seemed to consider Jack's words. Outside the classroom, the small crowd of students pressed closer to the doorway, trying to hear every word. Some whispered excitedly, others simply stared, mesmerized by the unfolding scene. Lily stood near the back of the room, clutching her backpack tightly. She felt like an outsider watching 2 forces collide, one rigid and unyielding, the other steady and unshakable. Part of her wanted to disappear to avoid drawing any more attention to herself. But another part of her couldn't help feeling grateful that her grandfather was standing up for her. After a long pause, Mr. Bennett sighed and leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "Look, I get it. Maybe I was too harsh, but I have standards to uphold. If I let one student slide, where does it end?" "You're right," Jack said, nodding. "Standards matter, but so does context. Did you even ask Lily why her pants ripped? Or did you assume she was careless?" The question hung in the air, heavy and pointed. Mr. Bennett frowned, clearly struggling to come up with an answer. Finally, he muttered, "It doesn't matter why they ripped. The fact is she came, unprepared." "That's where you're wrong," Jack countered. "Context matters more than you think. Let me tell you something, son. When I was younger, I worked with a lot of people who thought rules were black and white. They didn't care about reasons or circumstances. They just cared about enforcing the rules. And you know what happened? People lost respect for them. Because respect isn't earned by being rigid. It's earned by understanding." Mr. Bennett blinked, caught off guard by the sudden wisdom in Jack's words. He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, unsure of what to say. Jack took advantage of the silence to continue. When you send a kid home without pants, you're not teaching responsibility. You're teaching fear. Fear of making mistakes, fear of being vulnerable. Is that really what you want for your students? The teacher shifted in his chair, his expression softening just a fraction. I never thought about it like that. No, you didn't, Jack said gently. And that's okay. We all make mistakes. The important thing is learning from them. For a moment, neither man spoke. The only sound in the room was the faint rustling of papers as a breeze drifted through the open window. Outside, the students exchanged glances, sensing that the confrontation had reached a turning point. Finally, Mr. Bennett sighed deeply and ran a hand through his hair. Okay, he admitted. Maybe I overreacted. I'll apologize to Lily. But I can't promise this won't happen again if another student comes unprepared. I'm not asking you to promise anything, Jack said. Just try to remember that these kids aren't soldiers, they're human beings, and sometimes they need guidance more than they need discipline. Mr. Bennett nodded slowly, looking genuinely reflective. Then he turned to Lily, who was still standing quietly near the back of the room. Lily, he said, his voice softer now. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have handled things the way I did. Can we start over? Lily hesitated, surprised by the apology. She glanced at her grandfather, who gave her a subtle nod of encouragement. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. It's okay, she said softly. I'll be more careful next time. The tension in the room eased noticeably after that. Mr. Bennett offered a small smile, though it looked awkward on his usually stern face. Good. Now let's put this behind us and move on. As the conversation wrapped up, the students outside the door began to disperse, whispering excitedly about what they'd witnessed. Some of them couldn't resist sneaking peeks at Jack as he walked out of the classroom with Lily. One brave boy even approached him in the hallway. Are you, like, the Jack Taylor? The boy asked, wide-eyed. Jack chuckled, the sound warm and reassuring. Just a guy trying to do the right thing, he replied with a wink. By the time they reached the parking lot, Lily felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She climbed into the passenger seat of Jack's pickup truck, letting out a long breath. Thanks, Grandpa, she said, smiling shyly. I don't know what I would have done without you. Jack grinned as he started the engine. You'd have figured it out. You're stronger than you think, kiddo. On the drive home, Lily found herself replaying the events of the morning in her mind. She couldn't believe how everything had turned out. Her grandfather hadn't raised his voice or lost his temper, not once. Instead, he'd used patience and reason to make his point. It was a side of him she hadn't seen before, and it left her feeling both proud and inspired. When they arrived back at the house, Sarah Parker was already home. She greeted them at the door, concern etched on her face. What happened? She asked, looking from Lily to Jack. I got a call from the school saying there was some kind of issue. Lily hesitated, unsure how to explain, but Jack stepped in, summarizing the situation in a few simple sentences. By the time he finished, Sarah was shaking her head in disbelief. That man has always been impossible, she muttered. But, thank you, Dad. I don't know what we'd do without you. Jack waved off the gratitude with a dismissive gesture. It's nothing. Just doing my job. Later that evening, as Lily sat on the couch flipping through channels, her phone buzzed, with a text from Emma. OMG, is your grandpa really Chuck Norris? The message read. Lily laughed and rolled her eyes. Leave it to Emma to jump to conclusions. Still, she couldn't deny that there was something extraordinary about Jack Taylor. Whether or not he was related to Chuck Norris didn't matter. He was her hero, plain and simple. As the day drew to a close, Lily reflected on everything that had happened. She realized that while she might not stand out in a crowd, she had something far more valuable, a family that supported her and a grandfather who believed in her. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The days that followed the incident at school passed quickly, but they weren't without their changes. Word about what had happened spread like wildfire through Maplewood Middle School. By Tuesday morning, nearly everyone knew about Lily's torn sweatpants, Mr. Bennett's harsh reaction, and the mysterious older man who had confronted him. Some kids whispered that Jack Taylor was a retired action hero. Others said he must be some kind of secret agent. Whatever the truth was, one thing became clear: he wasn't someone to mess with. For Lily, life returned to something resembling normalcy. The teasing she had feared never materialized, partly because Emma made sure no one dared say anything mean. Instead, people seemed more curious than cruel. A few classmates even approached her to ask if her grandfather really knew karate or if he'd ever fought off bad guys. Lily didn't know how to respond to most of these questions, so she just shrugged and changed the subject. Still, it felt good to be noticed for once, not in an embarrassing way, but in a way that made her feel proud. Meanwhile, Mr. Bennett underwent a noticeable transformation. He didn't become soft or lenient overnight, but there was a shift in his attitude. During gym class, he still enforced rules, but now he took time to explain why those rules existed. If a student forgot part of their uniform, he gave them a chance to explain instead of immediately handing out punishments. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make the atmosphere in the gym less tense and more supportive. Lily noticed the change too. One day after class, she stayed behind to thank him. "I just wanted to say, I think you're doing a better job," she said shyly. "People seem happier." Mr. Bennett looked surprised by the comment but nodded slowly. "Thank your grandfather for me," he replied. "He reminded me of something important. Though things were improving at school, the real impact of the incident was felt at home. For Lily, it opened up a new level of closeness with her grandfather. Before, Jack had always been a quiet presence in her life, someone she loved dearly, but didn't fully understand. Now she saw him in a different light. He wasn't just her grandpa. He was a role model, someone who stood up for what was right without resorting to anger or violence. Over the weekend, Jack invited Lily to spend the day with him. They started by going to the hardware store, where he picked up supplies for a project he'd been working on, a birdhouse for his backyard. As they walked through the aisles, Jack shared stories from his younger days. He talked about joining the military, competing in martial arts tournaments, and traveling across the country. Lily listened intently, amazed by how much she didn't know about him. At one point, while examining a shelf of paint cans, Lily asked, "Grandpa, did you ever meet Chuck Norris?" Jack chuckled, shaking his head. "No, kiddo, never met the guy. Why do you ask?" "Everyone at school thinks you're related to him," Lily admitted with a grin. "Well, let them think what they want," Jack said with a wink. "But trust me, I'm just an ordinary guy. What matters isn't who you are, it's how you treat people." Later that afternoon, back at Jack's house, they worked together on the birdhouse. Jack handed Lily a small hammer and showed her how to nail the pieces of wood together. At first, she was hesitant, afraid she might mess up, but Jack encouraged her, saying, "You won't learn unless you try." By the time they finished, the birdhouse was sturdy and well built. Jack painted it bright blue, adding little yellow accents around the edges. When they hung it in the backyard, Lily felt a sense of accomplishment she hadn't expected. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, a reminder that teamwork could create something beautiful. That evening, as they sat on Jack's porch watching the sunset, Lily found herself thinking about everything that had happened over the past week. She turned to her grandfather and said, "You know, I used to think I wasn't special, like I didn't have anything cool about me. But now I realize I'm lucky. I have you." Jack smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "And I'm lucky to have you, kiddo. You remind me every day what's important in life." As the sky turned shades of orange and pink, Lily felt a warmth inside her chest, a mix of gratitude and pride. She realized that being extraordinary wasn't about standing out or having flashy talents. It was about kindness, courage, and the connections you made with others. Back at school the following week, Lily noticed another change. Students who had once kept to themselves began speaking up more, sharing their thoughts during class discussions or offering help to classmates struggling with assignments. Even teachers seemed friendlier, taking extra time to check in with students and ensure everyone felt included. It was as though the ripple effect of Jack's actions had reached farther than anyone anticipated. One afternoon during lunch, Emma leaned across the table and whispered, "So, does your grandpa teach self-defense?" "Because I kinda want to. Learn how to punch like him." Lily laughed, shaking her head. "I don't think so, but maybe we can ask." When she brought up the idea with Jack later that evening, he surprised her by agreeing. "All right," he said. "If you and your friends are serious about learning, I'll show you a few basics, but remember, martial arts aren't about fighting. They're about respect and control." The next Saturday, Lily and three of her closest friends, Emma, Jake, and Mia, gathered in Jack's backyard for their first lesson. Jack started by teaching them simple stretches to warm up their muscles. Then he demonstrated basic stances and movements, emphasizing balance and focus. Though none of them were naturals, they all tried their best, laughing whenever someone stumbled or lost their footing. Throughout the session, Jack kept reminding them of the principles behind each move. "It's not about strength," he explained. "It's about using your mind and body together. Respect yourself, respect others, and you'll go far." By the end of the day, Lily and her friends were exhausted but exhilarated. They thanked Jack profusely, promising to practice what they'd learned. As they left, Emma turned to Lily and said, "Your grandpa is officially the coolest person I've ever met." Lily couldn't argue with that. In the weeks that followed, Jack continued mentoring the group, helping them build confidence and discipline. For Lily, these sessions became a highlight of her weekends. Not only did she enjoy spending time with her friends, but she also cherished the opportunity to learn from her grandfather. Each lesson reinforced the values he lived by: respect, patience, and perseverance. At school, Lily found herself applying those same principles. When a classmate accidentally spilled juice on her backpack, she smiled and said, "It's okay. Accidents happen." When Emma struggled with math homework, Lily offered to tutor her. And when Mr. Bennett announced a charity run to raise money for local shelters, Lily signed up without hesitation, encouraging others to join as well. Slowly but surely, Lily began to see herself differently. She wasn't invisible or unremarkable. She was capable, compassionate, and strong. Her grandfather had shown her that true strength came not from physical power, but from the ability to lift others up. One evening, as she helped Jack plant flowers in his garden, she asked, "Do you think people will remember us someday, like will we leave a mark?" Jack paused, leaning on his shovel as he thought about the question. "Maybe," he said finally. "But it doesn't matter if they do. What matters is that we live our lives in a way that makes the world a little brighter, for ourselves and for others." Lily nodded, satisfied with the answer. Together, they finished planting the flowers, stepping back to admire their work. The garden looked vibrant and full of life, much like the bond between grandfather and granddaughter. As dusk settled over the neighborhood, Lily realized that her journey was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt and uncertainty. But with Jack by her side and the lessons he'd taught her, she knew she could face anything. As the weeks turned into months, life at Maplewood Middle School settled into a new rhythm. The changes that had started with Lily's incident and her grandfather's intervention continued to grow, spreading like roots beneath the surface. Students seemed more willing to support one another. Teachers were kinder in their approach, and even Mr. Bennett became someone people respected rather than feared. It wasn't perfect. There were still tough days and moments of frustration, but there was a sense of balance and understanding that hadn't existed before. For Lily, the transformation was personal as well as communal. She no longer felt invisible or unsure of herself. Instead, she carried a quiet confidence that came from knowing who she was and what she stood for. Her friendship with Emma deepened, and she grew closer to Jake and Mia too. Together, they formed a little group that stuck, together through thick and thin. They weren't the coolest kids in school, but they didn't need to be. They had each other, and that was enough. Jack Taylor remained a steady presence in Lily's life. Every Saturday, he met with her and her friends to teach them more about martial arts and self-discipline. These lessons weren't just about punches and kicks. They were about focus, patience, and respect. Each session began with Jack sharing a story from his past, often about times when he'd faced challenges or learned important lessons. Sometimes the stories were funny. Other times, they were serious. But they always left Lily and her friends thinking deeply about their own lives. One chilly Saturday morning, as the group gathered in Jack's backyard, he announced that it was time for something special. "Today," he said, smiling warmly, "we're going to practice what we've learned so far, and then I'll show you my favorite technique." The kids exchanged excited glances. Over the past few months, they'd heard rumors about Jack's legendary skills, how he could break boards with his bare hands or chop wood faster than anyone else. None of them had seen him do any of these things yet, so they were eager to find out if the stories were true. First, Jack led them through their usual warm-ups and drills. He watched carefully as they practiced their stances and movements, offering corrections when needed. When they finished, he clapped his hands together and said, "All right, now comes the fun part." He walked over to a stack of wooden boards he'd prepared earlier. Picking up 2 of them, he held them out to Lily. "Here," he said, "try breaking this." Lily hesitated, staring at the boards uncertainly. "I don't think I can." "You won't know until you try, Jack," replied, his voice encouraging. "Focus on your target, use your strength wisely, and trust yourself." Taking a deep breath, Lily stepped forward. She positioned herself carefully, raised her arm, and struck the board with all her might. To her amazement, it snapped cleanly. In half. Cheers erupted from her friends as she stared at the broken pieces in disbelief. "I did it," she exclaimed, turning to Jack with a wide grin. "You sure did," he said, nodding proudly. "See? You're stronger than you think." After everyone took turns breaking boards, Jack decided it was time to reveal his favorite technique. He picked up an axe and gestured toward a log sitting nearby. With one swift motion, he brought the axe down, splitting the log perfectly in half. The kids gasped in awe, clapping enthusiastically. "That's amazing," Emma said, her eyes shining with admiration. "It's not about strength," Jack reminded them. "It's about control and precision. Anyone can swing an axe hard, but doing it right takes practice and focus." Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the group sat around a small fire pit in Jack's backyard, roasting marshmallows and talking about everything and nothing. Lily felt a deep sense of contentment, surrounded by people she cared about and who cared about her in return. She glanced at Jack, who was quietly poking at the fire with a stick, and felt a surge of gratitude. "Grandpa," she said softly, drawing his attention. "Thank you for everything." Jack looked at her, his expression gentle. "You don't have to thank me, kiddo. Just keep being the amazing person you are." The next day, Lily returned to school feeling lighter than ever. As she walked through the hallways, she noticed small acts of kindness happening all around her. A boy helped a girl pick up her dropped books. A teacher stayed late to explain a difficult concept to a struggling student. Even Mr. Bennett greeted students with a genuine smile instead of his usual stern look. During gym class, Mr. Bennett announced that he was organizing a charity event, a community cleanup day where students and teachers would work together to tidy up the local park. He explained that it was inspired by the recent emphasis on teamwork and responsibility. "We're not just here to learn academics," he said. "We're here to learn how to be better members of our community." Lily immediately signed up, along with Emma, Jake, and Mia. On the day of the event, they arrived early, armed with gloves, trash bags, and enthusiasm. To their surprise, nearly the entire school showed up, including parents and neighbors. The park buzzed with activity as people worked side by side, laughing and chatting as they cleared litter and planted new flowers. By the end of the day, the park looked completely transformed. Bright blooms dotted the grass and the air smelled fresh and clean. Everyone gathered near the entrance for a group photo, beaming with pride at what they'd accomplished together. As Lily stood there surrounded by friends and classmates, she realized how much things had changed since that embarrassing morning months ago. What had started as a moment of humiliation had blossomed into something beautiful, a reminder that growth often comes from discomfort. That evening, as Lily sat on her porch with Jack watching the stars twinkle overhead, she reflected on everything she'd learned. Life wasn't always easy, and mistakes happened. But those moments of struggle could lead to unexpected opportunities, to grow, to connect, and to make a difference. "You know," Jack said after a long silence, "life is like gardening. You plant seeds, nurture them, and give them time to grow. Sometimes you get weeds, other times you get flowers. Either way, it's worth the effort." Lily nodded, letting his words sink in. "Do you think I'll be like you someday?" she asked. "Strong and wise?" Jack chuckled softly. "You already are, kiddo, you just haven't realized it yet." They sat there for a while longer, enjoying the peacefulness of the night. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, and the sound of crickets filled the air. Lily leaned back in her chair, feeling grateful for the life she had and the people in it. In the months and years that followed, Lily continued to carry the lessons she'd learned from her grandfather. She never forgot the importance of respect, kindness, and perseverance. And though she never became famous or extraordinary in the eyes of the world, she knew that she was making a difference, one small act of courage at a time. As for Jack Taylor, he remained a quiet legend in the community. Some people still whispered that he might be related to Chuck Norris, but most simply admired him for the man he was, a humble, wise, and compassionate individual who believed in lifting others up. Whether he was teaching martial arts, fixing things around the house, or simply listening to someone's problems, he left a lasting impact wherever he went. Years later, when Lily graduated from high school and gave a speech about resilience and community, she dedicated it to her grandfather. "He taught me that true strength isn't about power," she said, her voice steady and heartfelt. "It's about love, respect, and the courage to stand up for what's right. Even when it's hard." The audience erupted into applause, and as Lily stepped off the stage, she spotted Jack sitting in the front row, smiling proudly. In that moment, she knew she'd done him justice, not because she was perfect, but because she was learning to live a life worth remembering. And so the legacy of Jack Taylor and the values he instilled in those around him continued to thrive, spreading ripples of kindness and strength far beyond what anyone could have imagined.